Hello, welcome to Street Psychology Podcast. Today's guest is Kam Knight. He's going to be talking about internal resistance and answering the question of why can't we do something that we know we want to do and maybe need to do, but we just can't get ourselves to do it. So, Kam, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us what internal resistance is?
Sure. So I'll just start with who I am. My name is Kam Knight. I am a mentor, international speaker, and author of a dozen books in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance. And as far back as I can remember, I've been a fairly driven individual. I had a lot of strict parents who had high expectations of me and very little support. And as I was growing up, I grew up on television and learned that my value was dependent on what I had and not who I was. So the money in my bank account, the cars, and the job and all that. So as a result, I've always wanted to do more and have more in life. And although I've had my fair share of success, much of it was a lot more tribulations and beating my head against the wall, wondering why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. So I had a lot of aspirations I wanted to do in high school. I was trying to be a straight A student, but for some reason, I kept hitting up with procrastination and sabotage. And although I did okay, I wanted to get into an Ivy League school and I didn't. And although I got into a decent college, I wanted to graduate and go into a Big Five firm. At the time, it was a Big Five accounting firm. Now it's the Big Four. And although I got a good job, I didn't hit that mark. And I always wondered why. Like, why is it if I want to do something, I can't do it? And as I was starting to get into personal development, a lot of the answers were around motivation and beliefs. In fact, almost everything was just really around these two things. And although they are a part of the puzzle, I thought there was more to it. And over the past 15 to 20 years, that question always was in my mind. Every time I was stuck, I wondered, why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this thing so I can get the result that I want? And so the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain. And over time, my brain started coming to this thought of, wait a minute, there's a part of our mind built to hold us back. There's a part of our brain designed to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's the brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
So, this part of the brain that you call resistance, is there a neurological name to that, or is that something that you've given that part of the brain?
Yeah, more or less, I call it resistance because that's what we actually end up feeling. But to understand resistance, it helps to understand that the part of the brain that creates wants and desires works separately from the part that allows us to take action on those desires. This is extremely important, so I'll say it one more time. The part of the brain that creates wants works independent of the part that actually gives a green light to act on the want. So we have one part of the brain that is creating wants one after another. It doesn't check to see if we have the time or resources, or even if we have the ability to achieve the want, or even if the want is even grounded in reality. It simply creates wants. That's its only job. And oftentimes it's creating more wants than any one person can actually achieve. And then we have another part, which I call resistance, which looks at that want to see if we should do it. And it's a part that decides to see if you have the time, energy, and resources, or if this want is grounded in reality. And what's really important to understand about this is that it is possible for the brain to both create a desire for something and keep us from going after it. And that's what a lot of times is going on, because a lot of times people get into this turmoil. I want this thing really bad, but I can't have it. And when they feel like they can't have it, they think there's something wrong with them or they're not doing something right. but it's just that it is possible for their one brain to both create a desire and at the same time keep them from going after it. And when we look at it from this perspective, it makes sense why that is. Because the part that creates want wasn't meant to check to see if you were to achieve it. It's a different part that actually does.
Now that's really interesting. So I'm thinking there's a way to determine which ones are attainable, which one of these wants are attainable within us.
Yeah. So what I tell people is that both parts can actually get in the way. The parts that create want can get in the way, and so can resistance. So I'll go talk a little bit about the wants first, because the part of the brain that does create wants and desires is completely unrestrained. It's creating endless wants, one after another, as I mentioned, faster than any one person can achieve. And you can think of this part of the brain, which I call the wanting mechanism, as just a simple on off switch that gets flipped based on certain cues. It sees someone with nice shoes, it wants it. The latest car drives by, it wants that too. Someone attractive walks by, and it wants that as well. The wanting switch creates so many wants in a single day. No one person has the time, energy, or resources to achieve in a lifetime. Even if you lived multiple lives, you could barely scratch the surface at going after the want your brain creates in just 1 month. And that's because the wanting mechanism doesn't understand that your time, energy, and resources are limited. It simply creates wants. And even while you're working on one want, the mechanism will create other wants to chase. And so the wanting mechanism is the reason why people buy things they don't need, crave things that aren't fulfilling, and even why some people will cheat when they're already in a relationship. And it's also a cause of all its challenges because the wanting mechanism can pull us in so many directions, is difficult to move in any one. So, to the point that you brought up about knowing what our wants are and whatnot, what really helps to understand is that a lot of these wants are just coming up. And because we think, and because it's coming up in our head, we think we're choosing it. We're choosing to want it. And these wants can make it seem like that thing that we want or are chasing is going to be extremely fulfilling and it's going to be the thing that completes us in our life. It's very convincing in that. And then we go after it, and oftentimes it doesn't. In fact, as psychology says, we humans are terrible predictors of how something will make us feel. So a lot of our wants, especially the things we're going after, we haven't really done a good enough job to analyze if it's something we truly want, if it's going to be aligned, if it conflicts with other wants that we have. And we have challenges just because that the want that we've created could be unaligned, could be conflicting, or before we can even start on the want or while we're working on the want, our brain will create other wants to chase. And then we just go from one want to another without moving in any direction. I hope that gives better perspective on our wants and our wanting mechanism.
It does. And I'm curious about how this worked for you. How did it all come together for you in your life?
So I am somebody who had an overactive wanting mechanism. My brain was stimulated by there to do. If I saw a new car, I wanted it. The latest gadget out, I wanted that too. Most anything I saw on television, I wanted as well. And these wants were overpowering. They were so overpowering, they would consume my awareness so much, I would either lose interest in the wants I already had or I would forget about them. And what I realized is if I wanted to accomplish anything in life, I had to get a handle on it. And what I did is I actually tried to contain and remove as many triggers and stimuli for my wanting mechanism as possible. So, another thing to understand about our wants is we don't necessarily pick and choose our wants, they get triggered and stimulated. And for a person with an overactive wanting mechanism, it's being triggered and stimulated all of the time. And like I said, I was one of those people, which is why I've written over a dozen books and traveled to over 100 countries and done all sorts of activities like skydiving, scuba diving, snowboarding, rock climbing, dancing, yoga. and so much more. The way I contained or got a handle on it is, like I said, I tried to cut out as many triggers and stimuli as possible. And for me, that meant cutting out television, social media, YouTube, internet articles, and even not reading personal development. I even went as far as to cut out people and essentially created a bubble for myself that contained as much triggering stimuli as possible. And I know this is extreme, but I truly believe that for someone with an overactive wanting mechanism, this may not only be the best solution, but the only solution. That's because our wants are unruly. When they get triggered, it's difficult to release it. And when they do get triggered, it's actually difficult to focus on other things. This is just one aspect of the wanting mechanism that creates challenges, an overactive want. We can have strong wants, immediate wants, conflicting wants, high wants. What I found is there is about a good 8 to 10 different things about our wants that are the very thing that keep us from going after it.
Explain more about that.
The other aspects of wants?
Yeah, you said there are about 8 to 10
Yeah.
that primarily, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll talk about a few more. So one of them is what I call the strong want. This is where a person wants something really bad. It's often referred to as having a burning desire, and many coaches and experts will say having a burning desire is a good thing. But I would disagree, and that's because when our wants grow, so does our resistance. A great analogy for this is one of Einstein's theories of relativity, the theory of special relativity. The theory of special relativity says that space and time are not separate. The three dimensions of space, north, south, east, west, up and down, as well as time, is actually one and the same. It's the same fabric. In fact, scientists and physicists don't refer to space and time separately, but call it space-time. And in many ways, you can think of your wants and resistance as one and the same. It's the same fabric. So when our wants grow, so does our resistance. And our resistance growing makes our want grow even more. And that in turn makes our resistance grow even further. And this becomes this feedback loop where now we want this thing really bad and can't have it really bad. And I know many people listening, and I'm sure including you, have had moments where you wanted something really bad, but things weren't moving for you. But then as soon as you let it go, things began to fall into place. It's because our wants, the more we want something, actually creates an equal amount of resistance. And in these situations, it actually helps to reduce the want, which can in turn reduce the resistance and make it easier to do the thing. So this is a strong one. Then we have what I call an immediate. This is where a person wants things right now, right away, or things aren't moving fast enough. And what I tell people is most people can achieve most anything they want if they can be patient about it. And that's because our impatience can be a hindrance to our want. And that's because impatience is painful. It's extremely painful. It's so painful that we want to do anything to get rid of it. And there's two main things we do. We either get rid of the want because it's just too painful to sit in the patience, or we try to rush the outcome, which actually just pushes it away. Because trying to rush it, we're not doing the things in the right way, in the right order, and we don't get the result we want. And then there's a conflicting want. And this is a want that a lot of people I do feel struggle with. So as I mentioned, the part of the brain that creates wants and desires is completely unrestrained. So it doesn't check to see if the want that it's creating conflicts with another want. So a person can have two wants that are conflicting, meaning having one requires giving up another. And people who go after both end up achieving neither. So it really helps to pick one and let go of the other. And the people who do end up achieving both usually don't go deep in either and don't find either fulfilling. So I think these are just three aspects of what I just talked about that should give a person more clarity in terms of why I'm saying our own wants can create challenges in not only going after it, but achieving it.
Yeah. So I'm curious about how it looks in real life, in a real life scenario. How does that resistance manifest?
Yeah. So now we're talking about the wants. And as I mentioned, our own wants can create a challenge. When we do hone in on a really specific one that we're aligned with, then we hit up against resistance. And the way resistance works is anytime a desire or a want stands before us, it gets evaluated by resistance using a whole host of criterias. And if that desire is not in line with any of the criterias, resistance will prevent action. A great way of thinking about this is thinking about our wanting mechanism as a kid in a candy store. The kid just wants everything. And our resistance is like the parent trying to keep that kid in check. And there's various criterias the brain will go through. Some of the more commonly known ones that you've likely heard include beliefs. If a person has limiting beliefs, the resistance will put the brakes on that decision. If a person has habits that are not aligned with what the person's trying to do, it'll keep that person from going forward. But then it goes even deeper than that. It goes into topics such as self image. If a person has a self image where they think that they're cool and smart, a lot of times you find these people aren't able to do a lot, or they don't apply themselves or put themselves out there. And the reason is because if things don't go well, they have to face the fact that they're not as cool and smart as they believe themselves to be. So it's much easier to not do the thing and hold on to that self image, to do it and face the possibility of proving it wrong. So if resistance feels like what we're going to do might confront or damage our self image, it will make it difficult to do. And then there's other things like authority issues. Authority issues relate to our unconsciously held attitudes toward authority figures such as parents, principals, priests, police officers, and even personal development mentors like ourselves. If a person is growing up where they're always being told what to do, what not to do, how to do it, and how not to do it, over time, their brain gets fed up by being told what to do and it doesn't want to do anything. Even though we may grow up and eventually want to do those things that we were told to do, we can't because this authority issue response kicks in and it doesn't want to give the authorities in our lives the satisfaction of us listening to what they said. In many ways, we will damage our own progress just to not give someone else satisfaction. A lot of times we're doing it unconsciously. We don't realize why we're doing it. It just shows up. So these are examples of some of the criterias. In my work, I have come across about 25 to 30 criteria brain evaluates. But I don't want to keep talking because I can ramble forever on this. I just want to start the understanding of how resistance works.
Yeah, no, I definitely want you to talk. This is your space and your
Yeah.
expertise. And at this point, I'm learning because of course, I experienced that where I may have had some wants or some thoughts, but
Yeah.
not to take action. But I'm not really thinking of it from the perspective you're coming from right now. Oh, I'm resisting this because maybe my brain is just overloaded on wants and it becomes stagnant almost.
Yeah. So I would say for you, your challenge may not be coming from the wants itself. For some people who have like shiny object syndrome, wants are a big challenge because as soon as they start on one thing, something else triggers their wanting mechanism that pulls them away even further. And they go from one thing or another. Or they have such strong wants that they actually can't start on the thing to get the progress because that want is just so strong and intense, or they want it right now. And in their efforts to get results right away, they're doing things half-assed and not as good as it could. And so it does create challenges for them. But then, like I said, the wants is just one part of the equation. The next part is when we do decide to actually move forward on something, then resistance kicks in and says, okay, do we have the time, energy, resources? Can we actually achieve it? Is this grounded in reality? It goes through these criteria, like I said. It checks to see what our beliefs are. Do we believe we can be successful? It checks to see our self image. Will this confront our self image? It checks to see our authority issues. Will this piss off or give the people in our lives that we have resentment towards satisfaction? But it goes even deeper than that. It can go into things like the inner child, family systems, and even a concept that I call the core needs. So as humans, we have all sorts of needs, like the need for love, attention, affection, and approval. And some of these needs are deeply ingrained into us, like the need for a mother's love or a father's guidance. When we don't receive it, it's painful. It hurts a lot. So much so that it can make a person go crazy if they don't receive it. And if growing up, the brain learns that these needs can't be met or won't be met, it feels that it has no other choice but to distract us from the need. And there's many ways the brain will distract us. And one of them is to make our lives difficult, challenging, and keep us from finishing anything that we start. So our focus is always on problems and not this pain. And I'll share a really powerful story about this. I knew somebody who wanted nothing more in life than the love of his dad, but his dad never gave it to him, and it hurt him a lot. So much that he lived a hectic life, living paycheck to paycheck, never being able to make ends meet. And the reason his brain did that is because he had this strong need for dad's love, but the brain thought he could never be received. And because it couldn't be received, it felt it had no choice but to distract them from that need. And the way it did that is by creating so many problems. So the focus of his life is always problems and not this need. And this need doesn't just come from like a mother's love or a dad's guidance. It can come from somebody wanting to be with an opposite sex. And if they don't feel like they are deserving of it or don't know how to talk to or be with someone, then the brain feels, okay, we have this strong need and this need can't be met. So it distracts them with unhealthy behaviors. So the resistance goes actually quite deep. There's a lot going on internally in the human mind and body that we're not even aware of.
And that's, like you said, that's for any type of relationship within yourself or with others, resistance.
Yeah.
So you work with people on overcoming this resistance?
Yeah. So I have a course. I call it Conquer Internal Resistance to Achieve Your Next Goal. And it's a deep dive into this topic. We go into looking at all the different causes of resistance. And then I had mentioned that one part of the equation is the wants, the other part of the equation is the resistance. But more important part of the equation is tricks of resistance, excuse me. And by tricks, I mean, if our brain is going to stop us, it doesn't tell us that it's going to stop us or give us a reason why. It uses manipulative tricks. And the brain has all sorts of tricks that keep us from doing the thing. And I can go into it a little bit more, but to talk about what I do, that's what the course does. And then it goes into helping the person understand what their resistance is and then giving them tools to take sustainable forward action. And that's my course. But then I also do one on one work where I develop a technique that helps people go into their unconscious and see their own resistance. And we work on it at the unconscious level. What I realized, or the challenges I had when I was doing my work, is everyone was telling me what I should and shouldn't do and what my problem was and how to fix it. And I would listen to them, but I wouldn't get the results that was promised or the results that they were getting. And so I realized if my issues are in my head, why don't I go there for the answers instead of listening to people who likely have very little knowledge about my life and my history? And that's why I developed this method. And so when we go into a person's unconscious, we work on their issues, their specific blocks. It's not something that is just general concepts that get talked about. And I do feel a lot of people who are struggling and aren't getting the results with the coaching and advice they're receiving is because it doesn't apply specifically to them. It could on some levels, it could be pretty general, but the human brain, like I said, is extremely complex. And so no one person could understand all of your issues and struggles. And it's best to actually go into your own mind to not only get the answers, but to remove the resistance, which is why The work that I do can create such profound shifts for people in such a short time. A lot of people spend years in therapy and coaching, and they may make progress or none at all. But when we work on it at the unconscious level, it's much quicker.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, because motivation is a big factor here. And I'm wondering, let me ask you like this: how important is motivation?
So it's not as important as it is being used right now. I think a lot of our personal development centers around motivation and inspiration. And motivation and inspiration is just one piece of the puzzle. It does give us positive feelings and hope that we can do things. But the challenge is once those feelings wear off, we're right back to where we started. And so a lot of people are getting bombarded with a lot of motivational and inspirational message, and they're getting this like really big intense dopamine rushes that is flooding them with all these possibilities and dialogue of yes, you can do it, you can do anything, your unlimited potential. But then they're still stuck as before, they're not actually making any progress. And in fact, I would say motivation and inspiration can actually be a hindrance. If a person focuses on too much, what happens is they're just getting positive feelings, but never really taking action. And over time, they can become habituated and addicted to that dopamine rush that motivation and inspiration give. And I would go as far as to say a lot of the way traditional self development is moving along is actually doing more damage than good. It's actually burning a lot of people out because they're not working on the resistance piece. Because, excuse me, if we don't work on the part that holds us back, it doesn't matter how much motivation and inspiration we have, we won't be able to move forward. And more motivation and inspiration isn't going to be the answer. It actually, like I said, creates its own set of challenges.
So it's an internal process where you have to really get to the core of your personal resistance, what's
Yes.
causing it.
Yes, your personal and not someone else's personal. And the reason I want to stress that is because a lot of times people will be stuck and they will try different things and then they'll find the solution and they're able to move forward. And they think because that was a thing that helped them, it will be the thing that helps everyone.
Hmm.
But that's not the case because, like I said, anytime a decision stands before us, that decision filters through the brain using a whole host of criteria. And so, what the criteria that was keeping that person stuck that they worked through and had them move forward may not be the criteria that's keeping someone else stuck. And two, some people have less resistance, so they only have to work through a few criteria or just one of them. Other people have a lot more resistance. So, although they may work on the same criteria, or that criteria was still an issue for them, once they work it through, they still have other things to work through. That keeps them stuck that wouldn't let someone else. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, without a service like yours or going to a professional therapist or someone who can help an individual work through their individual
Yeah.
resistances, the likelihood of overcoming those barriers within yourself is pretty slim, because you're going to
Nearly,
be listening.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the human brain is so complex and there's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of things you wouldn't even think is actually happening internally. Like I said, concepts such as the inner child, our demographics plays into resistance as well, and our sensitivities to mistakes. If the more painful mistake is for someone, the more resistance they're just going to have. So two people can make the same mistake, but for one person, it won't have much of an effect, if at all. For another person, their brain can release some really difficult to sit with emotions. And for the person who's much more sensitive to mistakes, they're just going to have a harder time doing things because each task or goal, we're going to come up against mistakes. And a lot of them are these micro mistakes that are just simple things that the average person doesn't get hung up about. But for someone who's sensitive, each little micro mistake is like a big deal. And so it becomes much harder. That's another cause of resistance. And I said things like authority issues, but it goes really deep. There's a lot more criteria that are going on. And the challenge is because the brain is so complex, no one person can know every facet of the challenges it creates. Even if a person was studying the mind from the day they're born until the day they die, it just scratches the surface. And so they can actually go to someone who's trained and a professional, but not really uncover all of the resistance. So it helps to have different coaches and different perspectives to understand and see if it applies to you. But I like what I do because we can go directly into the unconscious and see all the resistance versus having to learn about all the blocks the brain creates and see if it applies to you. When we can go into a person's unconscious, we see all the blocks.
How do you access that unconscious, subconscious?
So there isn't, what I say is that there isn't a direct line of communication between the conscious and unconscious. Much of the unconscious is hidden from us, which is why it's called the unconscious. And so we don't necessarily see a lot of the activity that's in our unconscious that is driving our thinking and behaviors. So a lot of the thoughts that we think we're thinking them because they're in our heads, but the reality is driven by a lot of what's going on internally. So if we have limiting beliefs, our thinking is going to be in line with the limiting beliefs. It's not gonna, our thoughts aren't gonna tell us to go out and do ambitious things. It's gonna say things like play it safe. And if we have authority issues, instead of working and collaborating with people, and although those thoughts are in our head, like I said, we think we're thinking them, but it's really driven by what's going on internally. And I have a method, I call it the Kam Knight method, that I developed doing this work for a few decades that kind of breaks that barrier so we can see it. It's a little too much to go into detail here. We probably would need another podcast, but that's how I help people do it.
Okay. So it is possible. And you mentioned earlier that some people are more inclined to want more or to have that issue of not being able to stop wanting and the shiny
Right.
things. And is that, let's say, the question for that is, how do you know the difference
What do you mean?
within yourself? So that's something that I think you would know automatically if you're a person who is just seeing everything like, oh,
Yeah.
I want that.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
wants part is a lot more
Yeah.
obvious. It's like you can just see
Yeah.
it. A person may not see it in themselves until they understand how our wants work and how our mechanism triggers different wants and the challenges that it creates. But once they hear some of the things I talked about regarding wants earlier in this episode, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I have that, and I have
They'll
that."
know.
And it's very easy, yeah. Especially the conflicting want. A lot of people are stuck in life because they have two wants that are conflicting, meaning having one requires giving up the other. And a couple examples that I'll just throw out include some people want to find a special someone, but at the same time, they still want to date. Some people want a prestigious job, but at the same time, they want their free time. Some people want fame, and at the same time, they want their privacy. So there's a conflict. Like
Yeah.
having one by the nature of it requires giving up the other. Like if you're in a relationship, you're likely not going to be able to date unless it's like an open whatever. But for the most part, being committed in a relationship means not dating. There's just no way around it. And so when you want both, it's hard to go after either because it's a conflict. When a person does try to go after both, they end up achieving neither. And so it really helps to give up one and let go of the other. The challenge of conflicting wants is that as soon as you do give up one, your brain starts nagging you about the other, wondering what if you went with the other, and even creating pain that you don't have the other. And then when you switch to the other, the brain will start nagging you back about the first, wondering what if you stayed with the first and creating pain to bring you back to the first. So this really speaks to that quote, you can't have your cake and eat it too, because A lot of times we can get stuck in these wants where we just have to pick one. And picking one means sitting in the pain of not having the other. And it's better to achieve one and be in the pain of not having the other than having neither and just being stuck trying to decide which one. So the want aspects is very much obvious and we can see it.
Mhm.
And the resistance stuff is very much hidden. We actually don't even see it. And it requires a really detailed level of understanding of the human psyche and the mind and even psychology. Most psychologists don't understand criteria of the resistance. They may understand a few here and there. And even in personal development talks about some aspects of resistance that psychology doesn't. But even if you combine the two, it still doesn't paint a complete picture because, like I said, there's just so much going on. So it can be difficult and challenging.
Yeah.
And the
But what
reason
I,
I,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say the reason I say that is because I want people to be grounded in reality. One of the other challenges of self improvement in the personal development industry is that they are just saying things like, you can do anything you want, you have unlimited potential. And yes, those things are true, but we still have to be grounded in how the mind and body work, and we have to work within its limitations. And there are limitations that gets looked over, and because it gets looked over, people end up struggling and not knowing why.
Yeah, and what I heard is that either way, for people struggling with that conflicting want, there's gonna be some pain either way with either
Mm.
decision.
Yeah,
So you have to be willing to accept that.
yeah. In fact, most of our wants are going to be pain. So when we have a want, the brain floods our body with these really intense, positive, feel good emotions. Oh man, if I had that car, it feels so good. People will like me. I'd get that girl. All of that stuff goes on. And then as soon as we work on getting that car, those feelings go away. And we have to sit in the pain of the work until we get it. Right. So
Yeah.
there's always going to be a pain to go after our want. But then once we do achieve it, we do get those positive feelings and rewards. But in a certain moment, we do have to let go of the positive in order to get it back again.
Yeah, that's making me think of the happiness as a concept, that general. I'm not really remembering where I'm remembering this from, but where we're seeking happiness, and you can't really achieve happiness as an argument from somewhere because it's only going to be temporary. And
Yes,
you're going to be back to your normal baseline self, and you're going to be looking for something else to recreate that feeling. But it's almost an illusion
it is an illusion. And it's an illusion that's being perpetuated by media.
by
So,
media.
yeah, a lot of movies, Disney movies, television programming have that happy ever ending, happily ever after. They're giving this message that once you do the grit and grind, you'll get to this point where life will be great and perfect and you will be happy for the rest of your life. And I will be honest, I fell into line with that. When I was growing up, the messaging I got was work hard in school so you can get into a good college, work hard in college so you can get a good job, and then life will be great. And then media reinforced that by becoming rich and famous, having a nice car, and that's what will bring the joy. And I did all that. And to be honest, I was much more miserable than I was before. In fact, you oftentimes if we're chasing something that's unaligned, so a lot of these things I was chasing was not in alignment with what would truly bring me joy. So I call it an unaligned want. Is that while you're going after it, there's still some positivity there because there's this hope and expectation that once you get to this finish line, things will change and improve. But once you get there and things don't change, you're actually even more miserable because that hope is gone because you arrived at the destination. The hope was there because you're saying to yourself, once I get there, things will be better. But once you're there and things aren't better, then that hope gets pulled under you and you're even more miserable. In fact, I was much more miserable when I had achieved a lot of the successes that people had told me about. And what's really interesting is growing up And living in this culture and society, the messaging that I received and the beliefs that I formed that felt very true and real is that my happiness was directly proportional to the amount of stuff I had: the house, the car, the amount of my bank account, the person on my arm, all of those external things. And it was, I don't know how it was so real, but it was so real. And I felt like that's what I needed to chase. And if things weren't moving well, or if I wasn't feeling well, it meant that I needed more stuff or I needed to acquire more stuff. And the more I did, the more unhappy I was, or the less fulfillment I gained. And then at a certain point, I decided to travel. I've traveled to over 100 countries now. And in the beginning of my travels, I was carrying a lot with me. I had a big suitcase and a big backpack. But the more I was traveling, the more these were weighing me down. So I started letting things go until I went down to the bare essentials, which was some clothes and toiletries and a small laptop. Like that's all that I had the energy to travel. And I felt much happier and more free when I just had that than when I had all the nice car and the prestigious job and all of that stuff. And I was around people who were much more fulfilling versus when I was doing that stuff, I was around people that would help me get those things and they weren't the most fulfilling. And happiness is very much an illusion that we have been conditioned to think a certain way about, like it'll be there forever. And we've been led to think that it comes from certain things over others. In fact, the more I've traveled, I've actually been to some of the furthest places in the globe, and I've interacted with some of the most isolated humans on Earth: the Kuna in Panama, the Inuit in Greenland, Maasai, Africa, Aboriginals in Australia, and Indigenous in Asia, to people in developing nations, first world nations, people who live luxury and all of that. And what I have found, this is my own personal observation, is the brain is most happiest when it has the least. Like the less we have, the less we're weighed down, the less we're worrying about what will happen if it breaks, or I need to make sure that it lasts and it needs to look nice and all of that. And so when I did return, I tried to maintain a lot of the insights I picked up. So, although I did buy a house, I made sure to buy it on an acre of land. So I was around land and nature because that's what I realized my body loves most is physical contact and nature. So I'm around nature and I do a lot of social dancing, which is practically free. And I get a lot of physical contact when I'm dancing. And that generates more pleasure and pleasantness for me than a lot of the other stuff that we have been taught to chase. And it's not the kind of pleasure that once I get, it stays forever. I need to keep being in nature and keep going out dancing to continually refill that cup. And I think that's what people should be really thinking about when they are choosing their wants. Not to say they shouldn't go out after these big high aspirations, like why not? But we hear this story over and again. People who chase the big things and then they were miserable and then they looked for another path.
So I'm thinking, people, what about those out there who are saying, I can't just be in nature and go travel, or what do I do now? How do I know if I'm one of those people who are just overthinking it and I want everything, right? Because I feel like there's going to be that market of people who are saying, you know what? Cam is so right. I
Yeah,
don't need this stuff. I just need to be in the comfort of people I love, doing something I enjoy. But then the world is so stressful out here. They're like, but I need to go to work. What if I'm creating all of these problems for myself? Like that
yeah,
one guy he was talking about. How do they get out
yeah,
of that? Yeah.
yeah. So I do want to say that you don't actually have to quit your job and travel the world the way I did, but you can use the principles. So what I realized, there are certain things that my body naturally responded to in positive ways. And for me, that was nature and that was Physical contact, I actually learned when I was in Latin America and Africa. It's a very touchy culture. And so there's a lot of people just naturally hold hands and things like that. And I'm like, wow, there's a reason why people here are so happy because they're getting that oxytocin and all of that stuff. And so that's what I realized was for me. And there's other things as well. I like rock climbing. I also like doing yoga and things of that nature. Now, all the things I mentioned are actually free. You don't actually need money for any of it. Maybe the social dancing, concept socials do cost money to go to, like maybe $20, but it's far less than you would spend on going out to a night of drinking. The rock climbing, you can just do it outside, or you can go to a rock climbing gym, which isn't too expensive. Yoga, you can do it on your own. The nature, it's free as well. In fact, there's a quote by one of the most successful men in the history, Steve Jobs, and he said, "My favorite things in life don't cost any money." And it's true, they don't. And so all of us have options that don't cost a lot of money that give us joy and fulfillment that our body is built to receive. Our body is built to receive physical contact, connection, interactions, movement, which is dancing and being out in nature. And again, it doesn't cost a lot of money. So most people, no matter where they're at, they can achieve that. And they can achieve it with the job that they have. They can do something that they enjoy. It may make them decent money or make them good money or not. But once the job is over, they can find these activities that help them give that self that pleasure and joy that they're seeking.
So it does boil down to taking the value away from these tangible things that we've been conditioned to desire
Yeah.
and just enjoying things that,
Actually give us a fulfillment.
yeah.
Because here's the things that we've been conditioned to desire, like that fast car, big house, and all of that, the joy doesn't actually come in that car or the house, knowing that we have that
Mm,
car or house.
mm.
That's where that joy comes from. And that's why we're flashing it on social media. Look at what I'm driving, look at the shoes I got, and all of that. So the joy isn't even from the thing itself, it's from the person that you want to impress or the people that you want to. And yes, when someone's impressed by us, it does create these really positive feelings. But again, just like all positive feelings, they do fade. And then we have to do more things to impress them. And this is where people start burning out because they thought that one thing would get people's attention, affection, and approval. And it did for a moment, but then they got to keep performing, keep getting that next big thing to keep getting that dopamine hit from impressing or from approval. When they can get similar stuff by just doing the things that I describe that I find helpful. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to love rock climbing the way I do. For me, I love it. Like I try to go out at least twice a week and do it. Same thing with dancing. It just gives me the movement and the enjoyment that my body responds to. So the real key is just being aware and attuned to how your body responds to different activities. Some people might be doing running, or everyone that a person knows could be big fans of running. And they might think that I have to be a runner to get joy. But running might not be the thing for them. For them, it could be knitting, some other hobby that might be looked on as a low status activity or nerdy, but to them, they get pleasure and joy. So, one thing I didn't mention is I love space. I love astronomy, cosmology, anything to do or related to what's going on in the universe. And that's not going to attract here a girl hearing that is not going to be like, oh wow, that's hot. But I love that and I enjoy following it. So if I do watch something on social media or YouTube, it's usually just space documentaries. And because I enjoy it. And I don't care if somebody is gonna think of me better or less because I do it. It brings me joy, so I do it. And it's free. It doesn't cost me a lot of money. There are tons of influencers on YouTube who spend a lot of time producing these really good videos about what's going on in our solar system and the universe and all the different concepts of dark energy and dark matter. And there's this comet called 3I Atlas that came out of the solar system that is behaving in really weird ways. And the whole science community is like really following it. And it's fun, but not for everyone. But for me, it is. And so that's one of the things I do.
One thing you said is that's the start of one of those limiting beliefs that might get someone
Yeah.
stuck. It's saying, "Oh, a girl's not going to think this is hot, but this is what I like," and
Yeah.
that's that belief, right?
That's belief. Yeah. So that's a belief. In the past, I wouldn't talk much about it because my belief is people might think I'm a nerd or a dork.
Yeah.
And you know what? Nobody really cares. Maybe when we were students and in school, there was a lot more judgment. But as we become adults, nobody really cares about the things that were seen as dorky and uncool that you're doing. I remember I took my nieces to a Lego convention several years back, and there were all these adults who enjoy Lego. And they're adults, but they like it, and they actually bought a booth to show off their work. They paid money to have a booth to show off their work. They weren't even selling anything because that's how much building Legos was for them. And so they have a community of other Lego fans where they can connect with. And this is another important point I want to make. I know we're moving away from the topic of resistance a little bit, but it is important because we are talking about wants. And a lot of times people are chasing wants that aren't ultimately fulfilling for them because we've been conditioned to chase them. And it's okay to do things that are fulfilling. So, one thing I learned in my journey of traveling to 100 countries is that whoever created this universe or reality, whether it was God, aliens, or evolution, created it such that you can go as deep into that rabbit hole as you want. And there are an infinite number of rabbit holes to jump into. And what I mean by that is that whatever you enjoy, there is a group that is doing it that you can connect with and feel normal doing it around. And since we're ultimately seeking connection, we don't need to buy that big house and car to impress someone because we can find that connection with the things that we're doing. And there's going to be other people who will enjoy it as well. And you will find them.
I love that because it is so true. I don't think people realize that enough because we
Yeah.
have, like you said, the certain things in the media that most people do see, and
Yeah.
then you strive to be this person that you'll never be because you don't really even want to be that
You
person.
don't even want to be it.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
yourself, find who that is, and that's the first step in moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my travels, I've heard people doing the wildest thing. When I was, I think, in Lithuania or Latvia, there was a farmer's market on one of the weekends, and I was just walking down. My goal was to overcome my shyness to people. So my goal was I was going to say hi to every single booth. And I got to this one booth, and this guy, he takes trees from two different fruits and combines them. So you can buy a tree from him, one tree that grows both apples and pears.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a thing. And I was talking to him about it. There's a very specific process. You have to be very skilled to take the top of one tree and put it on the bottom of another tree, or top of one fruiting tree, like a pear, and put it on the bottom of another one. So one tree grows two different fruits. And I saw it with my own eyes, like it was there. And he was telling me the process. And that's how deep the rabbit hole is. There's actually a community of people who do that.
That's a good way of looking at it, actually.
Yeah.
You don't have to be this one thing, you can build as many layers to it as you
No,
need.
what I'm saying is that the rabbit hole that this guy jumped into was this very
Uh,
niche hobby that he's not the only one doing, even though I've never heard anybody else do it. But there's enough community around it where he can do it and have community and people who are like-minded with the same interest.
Yeah.
So whether it's board games, some people love board games, and now there's board game bars. Some people like social dancing, like myself. I like salsa and bachata, but there's a lot of kind of social dancing. There's West Coast swing is getting pretty popular right now. Zouk is also getting pretty popular, and then there's other types of dancing. Some people could like rock climbing. I like rock climbing, but I only do indoor rock climbing. Some people can do outdoor rock climbing. And even within rock climbing, there's bouldering or actually rock climbing with ropes. There's just so many things that are out there where
Yeah.
that give us pleasure and in ways that the body is built to receive pleasure that we don't need to chase what the norm is doing. In fact, I would encourage people to cut out media because a lot of what they think is going to give them fulfillment or where they're getting a lot of their wants from is from media.
So that would be your number one recommendation.
100%. Not just to have better decisions in life, but for better health, like
Mm.
better mental emotional health, because media is really not only damaging our focus, it's creating, I think, a lot of challenges with ADD because the scenes on television shows and even social media reels change so fast and there's so much more activity on them with tickers and banners and emojis that it's training our brain to hold attention for shorter and shorter
Mm.
period. That's one aspect. And
Yeah.
because a lot of these reels and even commercials, they actually take us on these emotional highs and lows. And so it's habituating our body to be addicted to these highs and lows. And even when we're not consuming media, our body's still going on these highs and lows. It's because what the media is doing. So that's just the health aspects. But then because we're seeing so many people on media doing so many different things, is triggering our wanting mechanism to want to have and do those things as well. So our wanting mechanism, a lot of it is being overly stimulated because of media. So if we want to contain our wanting mechanism, it really helps to cut it out as much as possible. I'm rarely on media. Like I said, I cut out television. I don't own a television. I cut out social media. I have social media accounts, but I have a VA that manages most of it. I rarely scroll through anything. I'm not on internet. I don't really do YouTube. I will do YouTube once in a while to listen to some of the space news that's coming out because there are a lot of influencers who are talking about the things that are happening in our solar system and stuff like that. But even then, I won't actually watch the video. I'll just listen to the audio because, like I said, the screens, the activity is overly stimulating.
Yeah. You shared a lot of good information today. And I, for one, starting to feel a little bit different about that resistance with certain things. And even if I'm not someone who's saying, oh, I want this, there
Yeah,
is an application for this for my life in general, how
yeah,
to just be more mindful of what I'm taking in and how I'm
yeah,
using it, stuff like that.
yeah.
Enjoying the small things. Could you tell the audience where they could find you, how they can learn more about what you do, and leave them with your final words you want them to remember?
Sure. So people can find me on my website, kamknight.com. That's KAMKNIGHT.com. And I have all my books there in the area of mental and physical and emotional performance. I have a course on internal resistance called Conquer Internal Resistance to Achieve Your Next Goal. They can also learn about it from kamknight.com. And then I developed this one technique that helps people go into their unconscious and we work on their resistance and challenges at the unconscious level. And they can reach out to me for the one on one at mentor@kamknight.com. I hope this was really helpful to you and your listeners.
Absolutely. I know that it's helpful for me, and I know it's helpful for listeners. Thank you again, Cam.
Yeah.
And did you want to say that final word, or have you said it?
What I usually leave with the different podcasts I'm doing is that wanting doesn't equate to having. Just because we want something doesn't mean we'll take the necessary steps to go after it. And that's because we have this thing called resistance that gets in the way. And if we try to go after it without realizing our own selves will create roadblocks, more often than not, it really derails us. But when we can be prepared to know that, hey, me, my own self, it's going to be throwing in hurdles, it makes it a lot easier to move forward and achieve the progress that we desire.
Thank you so much. Wanting does not equate to having.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep that with me.
All
Eh,
right. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.